Emmanuel Presbyterian Church, it's my great privilege to introduce to you our preacher for this morning. Is our Director of Children and Family Ministry, Debbie Barber. Debbie has just been an incredible teammate. She's been creative in supplying our kids and parents ways to disciple their kids throughout quarantine. And on this Sunday, we get to listen to her voice as she unravels God's mercy out of John chapter 5.
Hello, Emmanuel friends. We are looking at John chapter 5 today. It's a very interesting story. Got a little bit of strangeness in there, which is something that I particularly like. So anyway, let's read God's word. John 5, 1 through 15. Afterward, Jesus returned to Jerusalem for one of the Jewish holy days. Inside the city, near the sheep gate, was the pool of Bethesda with 5 covered porches. Crowds of sick people, blind, lame, or paralyzed, lay on the porches. One of the men lying there had been sick for 38 years. When Jesus saw him and knew he had been ill for a long time, he asked him, "Would you like to get well?" "I can't, sir," the sick man said, "for I have no one to put me into the pool when the water bubbles up. Someone else always gets there ahead of me." Jesus said to him, "Stand up, pick up your mat, and walk." Instantly the man was healed. He rolled up his sleeping mat and began walking. But this miracle happened on the Sabbath. So the Jewish leaders objected. They said to the man who was cured, "You can't work on the Sabbath. The law doesn't allow you to carry your mat." But he replied, "The man who healed me told me, 'Pick up your mat and walk.'" "Who said such a thing as that?" they demanded. The man didn't know, for Jesus had disappeared into the crowd. But afterwards, Jesus found him in the temple and told him, "Now you are well, so stop sinning, or something even worse may happen to you." Then the man went and told the Jewish leaders that it was Jesus who had healed him. Stories usually have a who, what, where, when, and why, and how that drive us from one point to another. Hopefully, along with that, there is some sort of interesting conflict or tension to be resolved and something surprising or unexpected to be discovered. In this story, John starts with when, and his description of when is very vague. It was during one of the Jewish festivals. Now, there were a lot of Jewish festivals, so this really doesn't tell us very much. But when John goes on to tell us where the story took place, there are lots of details. And that leads me to think that the place is pretty important to this story. So the place was inside the city of Jerusalem, near the sheep gate, at the pool of Bethesda. So the sheep gate was most likely a place where animals that were being brought for sacrifice were brought into the temple area. It was probably not a popular entrance for the rich and the famous. Would have smelled bad, would have been dirty, so not the best place. The pool of Bethesda. Bethesda means house of mercy. And this was a pool or spring in the city that was surrounded by covered porches where sick and disabled people were left. There's some evidence that this pool described here was a very deep pool. One place I read said it was 13 meters deep, which is pretty deep. And it was fed by a spring that would cause the water level to rise and fall at different times. Those who were sick, so that's just an interesting little archaeological fact. They found a pool that kind of fits that, so they think, oh, this is probably where it was. Those who were sick were usually considered unclean, and therefore were not allowed in the temple area. This pool was close to the temple area, and had these covered porches so that their people were protected from the elements. This may have been the closest many of these people could get to the temple. And it was called or known as the House of Mercy. So keep that in mind as we continue. So that brings us to who. Who is in this story? Well, there's Jesus, of course. It's the gospel, so it's all about him. And then there's crowds of sick people or handicapped people. There are those who could not see, could not walk, could not move. Jesus could have healed any or all of these people. But in this story, Jesus approaches only one of them, a man who had been sick and had been there for 38 years. So listen to their conversation. Jesus says, "Do you want to get well?" And the man says, "I don't have anyone to help me get into the pool in the water when it starts to bubble. Somebody gets there ahead of me." That's a really interesting response, isn't it? Doesn't make any sense. John doesn't explain this, but it seems that there was a belief that the first person to enter the water when it was disturbed or when the water level changed or it bubbled would receive healing from God, would receive God's mercy. Jesus didn't have anything to say about this belief or the complaint from the man. Jesus just told him, "Get up, pick up your mat, and walk." But why? And how? Miracles. We have no idea how. Jesus is Jesus. He does miracles. We don't get it. But why did he choose this man? The man hadn't asked for help. He showed no faith in Jesus. He was focused on his own problems and complained about other people. But Jesus didn't seem to be bothered by this at all. Jesus healed him anyway. And then Jesus just disappeared into the crowd. The man was left fully healed and completely unaware of who had healed him. Now, it's time in the story for the conflict and the tension. This happened on a Sabbath. It was a day with lots of extra rules about what you were allowed to do. There's no work, no carrying anything, no healing anyone, nothing that resembled work at all. Some of the religious leaders saw this man carrying his sleeping mat. "Why are you carrying your mat? This is the Sabbath. That is not allowed. You are in big trouble." "It's not my fault," the man said. "The man who healed me told me to pick up my mat and walk." Who would say such a thing to you? Not, "Oh, wow, you've been healed. That's cool." Just, what horrible law-breaking person would do this on the Sabbath? And the man had to say, "Actually, I don't know who it was." Later on, Jesus found the man in the temple. He said, "Look, you're well now. Stop sinning or something worse may happen to you." And the man immediately left Jesus, told the religious leaders it was Jesus who had healed him on the Sabbath. Wow, he didn't even know Jesus. He hadn't repented from his sin or done anything to show that he was seeking after God. Maybe this is why Jesus chose this man. Maybe this is why the name of the place mattered so much to John. God's mercy is not limited by what we understand or say or do or believe or have faith in. God's mercy simply is. When John introduced Jesus in John chapter 1, he had introduced him as the Word, the very breath of God made flesh. And when God introduced himself to Moses in Exodus 34 and declared his name, he said, the Lord, a God merciful and gracious, slow to anger and abounding in steadfast love and faithfulness." Mercy and grace, love and forgiveness is his name, his identity, the way he chooses to interact with us. That man sitting in the house of mercy for 38 years had given up hope. but Jesus knew him, and Jesus knows you. He knows the brokenness in your life, the places that desperately need healing. He knows the sin that causes trouble for you. His love for you is faithful, and his mercy is not dependent on anything you do or believe. There is a phrase that in Greek means, God, Lord, have mercy, Kyrie eleison. And there are a lot of musical arrangements of this phrase, a simple prayer asking God for mercy. Many liturgical churches use this simple prayer in their worship services. My favorite arrangement of this right now is by Fernando Ortega. We're going to listen to that in just a few minutes. And as you listen to this song, think about the broken and unhealthy areas of your own life. Know that there are people all around the world in many languages and cultures asking for God's mercy. And God is listening and answering those prayers. It is who he is, and it is what he loves to do. Listen and receive God's mercy.